Do you truly understand why collaboration is a critical skill? And would you like to learn how to implement effective collaboration techniques? In this course, we will focus on collaborating within cross-functional teams and on ways to collaborate across different departments in an organization. Hi, I'm Dr. Natalie Nixon, and in this course, you will learn the mindset required to collaborate, as well as the critical skills that will help you to be an effective colleague and team player across various areas within your organization. And ultimately, you'll leave this course looking forward to collaboration because of all of its net benefits: greater productivity, more meaningful work, and lots of learning along the way. Let's get started. According to research by the management consultancy McKinsey, 97% of employees and executives believe a lack of alignment within a team impacts the outcome of a task or project. So get aligned. But seriously, managing cross-functional collaboration is a lot easier to do when objectives are simple to track and you anticipate potential roadblocks. That way, you'll be sure to be able to manage the speed bumps that are bound to happen. First, be sure that objectives have been collaboratively developed. In a future video, I'll share a technique called quiet storming. This is a collective brainstorming technique that allows people to quietly and individually ideate, and then gradually share ideas about objectives, culminating in a list of objectives that everyone has contributed to. Quiet storming is an effective way to come up with group shared objectives. But once you've come up with the shared objectives, how do you ensure that they will be easy to track? Well, a popular way to do this is to ensure that your group's objectives are SMART. In other words, that they are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. For example, the following is not a SMART objective. The team will gather information about customers. However, this next one is a SMART objective. The 2 assistant directors on our team will prepare a 20-minute presentation deck about the psychographic characteristics of our newest customers, those acquired in the past 6 months, by March 15th. Be sure to write down the objectives and make them visible and accessible to everyone at a moment's notice. It's also a great idea at the beginning of a collaborative project to identify potential roadblocks. Again, quiet storming can be the technique you use to generate this list of roadblocks. Barriers and roadblocks are a lot easier to overcome if you've thought through in advance their potential occurrence. Finally, nothing will get done if no one is held accountable. Notice that in the SMART objective, there were 2 people on the team, assistant directors, who were identified as being responsible for getting the work done. Note also that by identifying a pair or a team within the team, it's a lot more likely that accountability will happen on a micro level. In addition, request interim check-ins to gauge progress so that no one is left in the lurch at the 11th hour. Follow this advice, and your team will be off to a great start for optimal collaboration. According to research from Zippia, more than 50% of U.S. workers say that their jobs are dependent upon collaboration. But that same research states that 86% of people in leadership roles are blaming a lack of collaboration for workplace failures. I think that means we've got some work to do. So I'm glad you're here. There are 6 essential skills for great collaboration. They are communication, curiosity, both self-inquiry and curiosity about others, empathy, receiving feedback, flexibility, and humor, being positive. Number 1, the ability to communicate clearly, effectively, and succinctly is fundamental for collaborative success. I would add that an emotional intelligence skill comes into play here, which we say in popular parlance is your ability to read the room. The second skill I'd like to highlight is curiosity. We must have the ability for self-inquiry when we are collaborating and the ability to be curious about others. Self-inquiry ensures that we are challenging our own assumptions. Curiosity about others on the team ensures that we inclusively vet all possible ideas. It's important to realize that as much as we highlight empathy as a leadership skill for the 21st century, the precursor to empathy is curiosity. And this leads me to the third skill, Empathy. Empathy is your ability to walk a mile in someone else's shoes and to feel the feelings of others. This skill helps you to be flexible. When we collaborate, if we excel in our ability to suspend judgment and pause, then we will more effectively work in a group. The fourth skill is your ability to take feedback. In collaborative efforts, there will be disagreements, and each member of the team must be willing to receive constructive feedback as well as know how to give feedback. This creates a feedback loop back into the collaboration skills of curiosity and communication. One of the best ways to give feedback is in the form of a question. For example, ask, "Would you share more about that point?" Or, "I'm not sure I understood why you concluded X, Y, or Z. Would you mind explaining that a bit further?" That's a constructive way to get clarification and empathize with another person's perspective. The fifth skill, flexibility, will automatically develop as you lean into the prior four skills. Flexibility is essential because you must be able to adapt to the multiple changes and shifts in plans that happen during any collaborative effort. Flexibility is a mindset that manifests as your ability and willingness to integrate changes in plans. This is really important because at the end of the day, as much as we may resist this reality, plans are fiction. That's because they haven't happened yet. And that's the case whether you're talking about a budget or your daily to-do list. The sixth skill, and probably the most understated and underappreciated skill, is humor and positivity. Collaborative efforts will have their ebbs and flow, their peaks and their valleys. So the ability to engage with a positive attitude will do wonders for long-term efforts. For example, when I worked in the global fashion sourcing industry and there was a delay in an order of T-shirts, my boss, Jim Schwartz, would add humor and sage perspective by quipping, "Remember, people, we're not doing heart surgery here," or my favorite, "Keep your eye on the donut, not the hole." All of these skills will go a long way towards building trust in a collaborative effort. Let's examine the Latin root etymology of the word collaborate. Co, as in with, and specifically with others, and labor, or labor, as in working. So, when we collaborate, we are in labor or laboring with others. We're working with others. It helps to know that root meaning, doesn't it? Another insight into the value of collaboration is to consider the African proverb, "Alone faster, together farther." And I bet you have your own set of examples of when rushing through a process cost you more than you gained. In our fast-paced society, is slowing down so awful? In fact, you may increasingly find that you relish the opportunities to pause and take a beat. Collaborating with others gives you the opportunity to slow down, reflect, and re-examine. But where to start? You must begin at the end. This may feel counterintuitive. What I mean by this is that you should start with the following question. Where do we want the plane to land? In other words, what will success look like to us by the end of this project? Everything should dial back from there. By starting at the end and clearly identifying what success looks like, your team can map out their objectives. In other words, you will do the challenging work at the beginning by creating a problem statement which clarifies, why are we even doing this? After having a clear understanding and vision of what the ideal end looks like, be sure to build in some flexibility because things are bound to change, get interrupted, and deadlines will shift. This is also where the collaboration skills of positivity, humor, and flexibility come into play. One suggestion about how to clearly define the scope of your project is to develop what we call in the design thinking community design principles. Know that when you collaborate, you are designing a work process. Design principles are qualitative markers that serve as guardrails for your collaborative work process. I always recommend that you have no more than 3 to 5 maximum design principles. They could be high-level, meta guideposts such as empathy or transparency. They should also include really specific values related to the project. For example, cost efficiency or parent advocates. The beauty of design principles is that they are simple, they're memorable, and depending on your project, you could also assign metrics to them. Goals are dreams with deadlines. Deadlines may feel like minutia at the start, but they are so important for creating boundaries, expectations, and accountability. Jointly discuss what realistic deadlines will be for the project. And again, start at the end and work your way back. Assign accountability partners to those deadlines. I also recommend that you pad the deadline by a couple of weeks, knowing that life happens, markets shift, organizations are organisms, and things are bound to change. So, follow this approach to jumpstart your collaborative effort. Begin at the end, establish design principles, and jointly develop clear deadlines. An important and practical way to ensure expansive and meaningful collaboration is to create a roadmap. I like to unpack the roadmap in terms of people, process, and place. In other words, who are the people that should be involved within our organization or externally to it? Are there some stakeholders that we should be considering to bring in on the process? Are there certain people or companies within or outside of our sector whom we admire from afar that we want to bring in on the process? Secondly, what sorts of processes will we need to set up? Those processes could include meetings. They could also include visits for research. And finally, place means to consider where the activity should occur. Internally in the building or remotely. Perhaps it should happen at the next all-hands meeting. So, people, process, and place is a helpful way of dividing up the following 3 types of goals in your roadmap: low-hanging fruit goals, mid-level goals, and moonshot goals. The low-hanging fruit goals are those which are simple and feasible. They can be accomplished within 1 week to 90 days typically. It's important to identify low-hanging fruit goals because this sets up the team for small, short successes at the start of a project. And this matters because when we can celebrate small successes at the beginning, momentum gets sparked. Mid-level goals are those which are going to require a bit more time and effort. Buy-in should be earmarked to take anywhere from 3 months to a year. Moonshot goals could take anywhere from 1 to 3 years to achieve and may initially feel impossible based on the funding and other resources required. Finally, a good roadmap will also build in the following considerations: accountability. Who is responsible for a particular action item? Roadblocks. What barriers can we anticipate that will slow us down? And elixirs. What could we have in place to deal with those roadblocks? Here's a link below to a journey map which shows how customers might engage with a product or an experience. It's called the 5 E's Journey Map Framework, and it's thought to have first been introduced in 1994 by Larry Keeley, a strategist and co-founder of the Doblin Group. The service design and experience design community likes to use it a lot. But for our purposes, we can use the 5 E's as a way to map collaboration efforts, in part because it demonstrates the build and the cyclical nature of collaboration. The 5 E's are entice. How will we attract people and get them excited to engage in our project? Enter. How will they start to work on this project? Engage. What activities will we actually do? Exit. How and when will we clearly conclude the project? When will we know that it's complete? And finally, extend. What are aspects of the project that we want to extend so that we build on the momentum and are thinking about next steps? Is there a physical or a digital document or object that will help people extend the project or the experience? At each of the 5 E's, you can plot your 3 types of goals. Remember, those are low-hanging fruit, mid-level, and moonshot goals as well as accountability, roadblocks, and elixirs. Let's face it, most of us, if we're honest, really don't like the idea of collaboration. When our managers suggest or require us to work with people from other teams or departments who may have a different set of experiences, skill sets, and backgrounds, secretly, we may be dreading the possibility that those folks will just slow us down. So, why this resistance to collaboration? My experience shows that when we collaborate, at the end of the day, a lot of our assumptions will be challenged. That can feel threatening, and thus the resistance. But here's the cool thing. When we collaborate, we open ourselves up to a much more expansive and meaningful way to approach our work and gain productivity. Friction can actually be great. No one knew this better than the former head of design at Nissan, a gentleman named Jerry Hirschberg. Whenever Jerry was leading his team through a design challenge, he would also invite people into the process from different departments at Nissan, from finance, human resources, manufacturing, sales, and marketing, for example. Admittedly, some of the designers did not look forward to this, and Jerry was well aware of that. But he had a method to his madness. He understood that the friction that we feel at the start of some collaborative efforts and that tension can be a good thing because friction ultimately yields energy. So Jerry thought, why not convert that friction and energy into something good? Jerry Hirschberg was building on the idea of cognitive diversity. I like the following definition of cognitive diversity from Patrick Thibodeau, an enterprise IT reporter and senior news writer at TechTarget. Cognitive diversity is the inclusion of people who have different styles of problem solving and can offer unique perspectives because they think differently. The range of training, skills, expertise, approaches in different team members' ways of thinking and approaching a problem can be used for good. Those diverse ways of making sense of a problem are advantageous. That's because each of us, depending on our training, our skill sets, and our experiences, will ask a completely different set of questions when examining a problem. And questions are inputs into a system. So the more diverse the inputs or the questions, then the more innovative the output. Here's an exercise I'd like you to consider doing. Think of a current work project. Then think of the most unusual suspects in your organization and invite them into the process. You don't have to make it a huge shift in the way you typically work. Perhaps try starting by just inviting 2 very differently skilled people from within your organization to observe the process, or to comment on a draft version of what you've developed, or even invite them in on the actual project. The initial unease and discomfort will be natural because you may have some explaining to do. You may have to unpack jargon and your assumptions could be challenged. But ultimately, their fresh eyes questions will bring you miles further versus just a few inches further in your work process. Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, described trust as, quote, the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships together, end quote. I really like Covey's metaphor that trust is the glue of life, because when we consider what it takes to cohesively design a collaboration process, trust must be foundational. In fact, the 6 essential skills of collaboration that I shared in Lesson 1 all help to build trust. Just as a recap, those skills are communication, curiosity, empathy, receiving feedback, flexibility, and humor, positivity. I also like to think of trust as the buoy that keeps us buoyant through difficult circumstances. Building team trust benefits all group members by serving as leverage to stay committed through the long haul when collaborating. When there's trust among the team, people feel psychologically safe to share their opinions and to respectfully disagree. Conflict resolution can happen more fluidly. An article by Brian Klitsch, content marketing manager at Mural, the online collaboration platform, lists 10 ways to build team trust. But here are just 5 from his list, which I think are especially important and will go a long way in your efforts to build team trust. Number 1, set expectations and boundaries. When you're clear from the outset about what is necessary to move forward, for example, setting deadlines or clarifying communication style preferences, such as, I get way too much email. Please just text or message me on Slack, Voxer, or fill in the blank. This will set up everyone for success. Number 2, have regular one-on-one meetings. Even though you may be working in a group, having these one-on-one touch-base meetings helps an individual person to feel seen and heard, or to air out a grievance in private. If you're managing the team, these one-on-one meetings will help you to get to know the person a little bit better. Number 3, admit when wrong. No one likes to admit errors. It's hard to do, and it requires lots of humility. However, in professional situations, when managers admit mistakes, it actually builds trust. It shows that they're human, and it models behavior that's expected from everyone: accountability and transparency. Number 4, celebrate the smallest of milestones. As important as it is to admit mistakes, it's equally important to celebrate even the smallest of successes. When we're positive about our wins and we take the time to mark them verbally or with a small token of appreciation, it builds positive energy and a momentum to keep going towards the goal. For example, sometimes I will text or email a $5 Starbucks card to colleagues who are pivotal in setting me up for success when I give a keynote. People are always pleasantly surprised. And finally, number 5, conduct team-building activities. Any activity that prompts sharing, movement, reflection, and sometimes a bit of play will help to build trust. That's because when we're moving or laughing, we're rooted in the present and we can more effectively connect with each other. And that connection builds trust. Here are a couple of team-building exercises that you could try. The first team-building exercise that I suggest is a scavenger hunt. This is a great activity to do early on when people are getting to know each other. On a sheet of paper, list anywhere from 10 to 20 descriptors that could describe a person. For example, I'm a parent, or I love swimming, or I play a musical instrument. The goal is during a discrete amount of time, say 20 minutes, for team members to walk around the room and find at least one person per descriptor, maybe more, until their entire list is ticked off. This exercise gets people moving, and it's a fun way to discover similarities and differences between each other. The second team-building exercise could be done when you're midway through a project and you have a clear problem statement, objectives, and goals. I like to call this be an anthropologist for the day. In this exercise, people work in pairs and they get out of the building. Ideally, you go to a part of town where you can easily do people watching. Sometimes a local shopping mall or a train station is a great place. You can devote 1 hour to this. The objective is to do a deep dive with one's observational skills. The content of this exercise does not have to relate to the project at hand. The point is the process of observing together and sharing notes with each other and collaborating with each other in the process. Then at the end of the 1 hour, observing in pairs, regroup and compare notes and insights about this process. Extrapolate from the process what's relevant to the project at hand. It could be something like, I now realize we should be asking more what-if questions on this project. The act of working together in a different environment in pairs will build trust among all teammates, but on a smaller scale. I challenge you to try one of these activities within this month and add it to your calendar, because goals are dreams with deadlines. And once completed, reflect on how it went. From where do good ideas come? In my experience, the best ideas come when we are open. Great ideas come to us when we are observing deeply and listening actively. This means that the best idea generation can come when we are working with other people. So, This is great news for collaborative team projects. Generating terrific ideas requires generosity. You must be generous with remaining open to a process and not coming to conclusions too quickly or judging too early that an idea is bad or good. Being generous with yourself is as important as being generous with your teammates. My professional experiences with clients has shown that teams tend to get too tactical too quickly. They don't spend enough time in the blue sky arena asking really big, sometimes preposterous questions that could really take them to the next level. You must remember that deadlines, budgets, and limited resources in general will always exist. So, by starting with big, blue sky, expansive ideas, you're setting up your team for success. Start by exploring what's desirable. What do our clients want? Versus how do we push our gizmo out to customers? Then you can begin to converge and zero in on practical, tactical ways to make what's feasible and viable. The difference between feasibility and viability is that feasibility has to do with how we're going to make something work and function. Viability is about ensuring that the idea generates value. That could be financial value, social value, or cultural value. But remember to start first with what's desirable and give your team the grace and the space to think really expansively. One of the ways I like to help teams think expansively is through an exercise called quiet storming. It's distinctive from your regular old brainstorming because rather than having one dominant person in the front of the room who asks the group to shout out their best ideas, each person in the room is given a blank piece of paper, a pen, and the same question prompt or very simple phrase to spark the brainstorm. With limited time, say 90 seconds or as long as 5 minutes, in complete silence, each individual member of the team jots down their own ideas as relates to the prompt. At the end of the 90 seconds, people pair off, share their ideas, and begin to identify similarities and differences. Then after about 10 minutes of that portion, the entire group shares what emerged as the most interesting among the pairs and has a group discussion. This sort of idea generation, quiet storming, diminishes the likelihood that extroverts will dominate and ensures that all individuals' ideas will be included. Quiet storming democratizes the ideation process while ensuring that individuals get solo time to generate big ideas, air them out on a smaller scale within their pair, and then share collectively. You'll find that there's less ownership of any particular idea, but instead the group begins to collectively build on all ideas. So, try quiet storming at your next meeting and limit it to just 5 minutes. I bet you'll be surprised at the quality of ideas that emerge collectively from the group. Have you ever heard someone say feedback is a gift? You may have internally cringed and rolled your eyes at this. And I understand. You expose yourself when accepting feedback. In the best case scenario, you're receiving constructive information about performance. But in the worst case scenario, it could feel very personal, painful even. But there's a different way to think about feedback. Let's start with the body. Yes, your human body. When you receive feedback, the reptilian brain, specifically the amygdala, hijacks your body. You go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And that's because at a visceral level, critique feels threatening, taking the brain back to equating the feedback to, oh no, the tribe may desert me. So you may experience sweaty palms, dilating pupils, and an increased heart rate. However, once you understand that this is the body's natural and ancient reaction for protection, you can rationally remind yourself that you're not amongst dangerous wildlife and your tribe will not desert you. In fact, you are most likely in a conference room with windows and a door that you could easily exit. I've learned a lot about giving and receiving feedback from a book by M. Tamara Chandler called Feedback and Other Dirty Words: Why We Fear It, How to Fix It. The best times to give feedback really depend. In terms of the cadence of a collaborative project over time, try to give feedback at regular intervals. Do not save it for the end when modifications may be too late. In terms of interpersonal interactions on a team, feedback must be situational. For some people, giving it in the moment is appropriate because then the feedback is memorable and it can be tied to muscle memory. But in other cases, waiting until after a person has completed an activity and is relaxed makes better sense. For example, if you are leading a conference call for the very first time and suddenly receive a text from your boss saying, "This is great, keep up the good work," you may respond positively. But you could also begin to doubt yourself with negative self-talk, asking yourself, why did she feel the need to say that? Did I just flub something? That's why it makes sense to set up expectations and ground rules about giving and receiving feedback at the start of a collaboration so that everyone is on the same page. Here's a feedback framework that I first learned from the Stanford D School. In my experience, it is one of the simplest and accessible ways to modulate feedback. It's simply, I like, I wish, and what if. So you start with the positive and share what you like about what the person has just shared or completed. And then move on to the soft critique phrased as, for example, I wish I understood why you didn't include cost estimates at this stage. Would you share more about that? That's a lot more effective than demanding, where are the numbers? Show me the money. And finally, end with a collaborative opportunity to dream bigger and build on the ideas proffered. Ask a what if question and end your feedback session with curiosity and positivity. Try this helpful framework at your next meeting when you are asked, so does anybody have any questions? It will work wonders. In a world where we can work from anywhere, collaboration will increasingly happen on a virtual basis. Fortunately, there are some really cool technologies that we can use to optimize collaboration when working virtually. One of my favorite ways to collaborate with my virtual team is to lean into using video and voice applications. That's because there's so much that can be lost in translation if you're trying to communicate only through email or text messaging. So one app that I have found to be incredibly effective is the Loom app. You can use it to review documents by recording your audio comments over a screen share and send feedback through video and voice. Feedback lands a lot better when you see someone's smiling face and hear the tone of their voice. Increasingly, companies are using platforms similar to Slack or even Notion for real-time collaboration as well. The key to using these applications is to not overuse them. When used in moderation, your team will avoid an oversaturation of notifications, which could actually run counter to being productive. The Google platform is quite helpful for collaborative writing projects. For example, when I've participated on co-authoring articles, we often schedule a 1-hour working session, silently and synchronously writing on the same Google Doc. We can see the changes that each other is making and will occasionally pick up the phone to elaborate on a point. That's one option. Obviously, you can also use the Google suite of offerings to work asynchronously too. And now even applications like Dropbox have ways for you to work collaboratively on writing projects. Two of the earliest adopters and category makers for collaborative virtual whiteboards were the companies Mural and Miro. These are great platforms to use in virtual workshop environments as well as for team projects. You can create any collaborative activity that you would do in person, from brainstorming activities to playing games to collaboratively completing a strategic roadmap. Depending on your project goals, these platforms provide helpful templates as well as the ability to create your own bespoke virtual boards. These are just a few examples of collaborative tech applications. Try experimenting with others until you identify what's best for your collaborative work project. Now that your project is off the ground, how do you sustain momentum halfway through the project and continue to motivate your team's commitment to the process? Collaboration across different functional areas has long-term benefits, but it can be challenging to start. An example of a cross-functional collaboration would be to have colleagues from different departments, say manufacturing, finance, and human resources, working together. Initially, there will be a learning curve. However, ultimately, the friction at the onset yields energy, which can be used for good. This is what Jiri Hirschberg, former head of design at Nissan, called creative abrasion. Let's go back to the fundamentals of collaborative projects and allow me to remind you that starting with clear goals and the purpose, or the why, behind the project is essential. We reviewed in earlier videos that this is where establishing design principles as guardrails at the start of your collaborative project is helpful. As a reminder, design principles are qualitative markers that serve as guardrails for your collaborative work process. I recommend that you have no more than 3 to 5 maximum design principles. Momentum is a funny thing. While it is sustained by action, not inertia, pausing every once in a while to regroup and assess goes a long way to sustain momentum. So in addition to periodically reviewing your design principles, which are tied to the purpose of your project, also try the following actions to sustain cross-functional collaboration. Praise and celebrate small successes. Enthusiasm builds momentum. Revisit the clear goals and design principles established at the beginning of the project and be open to modifications now that you have made both progress and mistakes in the collaborative process. Visualize the finish line, literally, with diagrams, doodles, or slides of what success looks like. Take tips from fundraising initiatives which use visualization techniques such as poster boards that show funds raised and funds remaining with fun visuals and dollar markers. Clearly articulate the pain to avoid if the goal is not met. In other words, as important as it is to articulate what success looks like, also be sure to map out the pain to avoid. Sometimes these are called pre-mortem exercises. I once was part of a pre-mortem exercise midway through a project that was so effective in helping us clearly identify what contributed to potential failures that we experienced a resurgence of energy and motivation just to avoid that potential pain of failure. Ask yourself and your team, which one of these simple actions could we take to produce momentum for this project? Try any one of these tips for sustaining momentum. Congratulations on completing this course. Now you are equipped with simple and actionable ways to collaborate with your team. I would love you to stay in touch. So follow me on LinkedIn for more great content and make sure you sign up for my Ever Wonder newsletter digest and download a sample chapter of The Creativity Leap by going to figure8thinking.com. Thank you so much and stay wondrous and rigorous.